I'm Abby Artemisia, and I'm a botanist, herbalist, and forager. So I do all of those things. And I live about an hour from here in Burnsville. I'm super excited to be here and to teach y'all about all of the wild things and how we can eat them and which ones we can eat and which ones we shouldn't eat. So without much further ado, we are going to start walking and talking. This one might have the same English name, but a different botanical name. And this one is a tree, and the poison hemlock you might have heard about that Socrates supposedly ate and died was an herbaceous plant in the carrot family. So totally different. The needles on this are edible. So because it is threatened, I wouldn't want to take a lot of needles. That's when we start talking about ethics, right, of wild crafting or foraging. And so it's a little bit different for each plant. And so this is a really good opportunity for you to do your research and really get to know the plants. But I wanted to point this out because this is something that happens to evergreens this time of year. So if you can see this new growth that's really bright green right here, it's super tasty. So maybe I'll just pass a few of these around so you can check them out. And maybe just take one each of those needles. So spread them out between you. And you can try some. Evergreen needles are really popular food in Scandinavian countries. They make a spice out of them and marinate the fish that way. And it's really tasty. What does it taste like?
Evergreen.
Yeah. Green. What else?
A little bit lemony.
Pine. What else?
It's a little bit lemony.
Lemony.
A little citrusy.
Citrusy. Yeah. So I sometimes get like a little taste of rosemary. Does anybody else get that a little bit? I do. So I will, again, make a spice out of it for fish, especially. I will combine it with salt and let it infuse into the salt, and it makes a really tasty salt for all kinds of things. So because it does have like this kind of mix of citrusy rosemary going on, you can just imagine how many things that would taste fabulous on. And my friend actually swears her favorite way to eat it is on her eggs. So wouldn't think about that with evergreen, but it's really tasty. She also loves it on vanilla ice cream. So that would be pretty fantastic. These green tips are going to be the most flavorful part. They're the new growth. And when we think about ethical harvesting, again, we want to think about this is this year's growth. So we don't want to harvest too much of it. But if you were just going to infuse it into a salt, you wouldn't need that much. So that's hemlock. While we're here, I wanted to point out something else important that we just talked about briefly that y'all should all know, which is this plant right here, which is what? Poison ivy. So if you've heard the leaves of 3, let it be, that's poison ivy. There's one very similar to it right here. That's not poison ivy though, because it's got the 5 leaves, which if you actually want to get technical and botanical about it, they're leaflets and not leaves, because both the poison ivy and the Virginia creeper have compound leaves. So all 5 or all 3 are parts of one compound leaf. So the 3 are all leaflets and the 5 are leaflets. So that's a good way to start when you're identifying plants. Is it a simple leaf, right? So like this one, it just has one single leaf, or is it a compound leaf? Does the hemlock have any medicinal benefits? And yes, it does. It has a lot of vitamin C, just like most of our other evergreens that have needles on them. So lots of vitamin C. If you were out camping and you started to feel something coming on, you could make a tea by just infusing these in water overnight and or putting them in a little bit of hot water. Vitamin C is destroyed by heat, so I would prefer not to heat it if I didn't have to. But a little bit of heat could be okay if you needed it quickly. But yeah, lots of vitamin C. And actually more vitamin C than citrus fruit. So pretty cool because it's available all year long. right here. We don't have to buy it from the grocery store from really far away.
So does the poisonous hemlock grow in the United States?
Yes, it does. It grows in open fields usually. Looks very similar to Queen Anne's lace. This is a sometimes common, sometimes not common, native beautiful plant called Solomon's seal. And I just love it partially because it is so beautiful. It does have a look-alike, so people often ask me, does that one have a poisonous look-alike? And that's the hardest question I ever have to answer, because the answer is, well, that depends. How much do you know? Because the more you know, the less look-alikes there are. So there is a look-alike to this one, which is not poisonous, which is called Solomon's plume. Some people like to call it false Solomon's seal, but this one is Solomon's seal. And there's some different ways you can tell that, but the easiest way to tell them apart is that the Solomon's seal has these flowers, so the buds, that hang down along the stem, as opposed to the Solomon's plume. And the reason why it's called Solomon's plume is because it has a plume of flowers at the end of the stem. So it looks like a feather plume in someone's hat. Solomon's seal, it's got really tasty leaves. I think I'm gonna leave these leaves for right now because we'll have some later in a couple of different things we're eating. And it's not super prolific. So I like to leave it whenever I can. If you found a big patch of them, you could take a leaf or two off every plant, and that would be a sustainable way to eat it. The roots are edible as well, but I've never harvested them for that because they're not super prolific. So it said you can make like something similar to mashed potatoes out of the roots, but that would take a lot of root. So I don't like to do that. But the roots do look really cool. They have these little seals on them, similar to the wax seal that people used to put on envelopes. So that's how you can recognize them too. And they are also medicinal. Not really talking about that today, but it is a great native medicinal moistening for the ligaments and for the respiratory system, the lungs. So it's a really awesome native plant, and you can plant it in your garden pretty easily too.
I've read that the young shoots are like asparagus.
Yes, the young shoots are like asparagus, and also Solomon's plume in the same way. So that's good to know, both of them.
Do you buy them at a nursery, or
You can buy them at a nursery, yeah.
You can eat them uncooked?
You can, yeah, you can eat the leaves uncooked. I do want to point out an edible and a poisonous plant that are lookalikes while we're talking about lookalikes. So this one, it had some early spring flowers, which are already gone. Does anybody know what this leaf? Yeah, violet. Good job. So this is a leaf of a violet. This one with the yellow flowers is something different. So if we hold these leaves up, can you see how those could be mistaken for each other? Yeah. So this one with the yellow flowers is called ragwort or golden ragwort. It's not super fatally poisonous, but it can make you sick if you eat it. So we don't want to. Anybody see any major differences between the two? Yes, good. The violet leaf comes to a point on the top. So if you want a good mnemonic device, if you turn it upside down, it makes a V for violet. And that's a super easy way to remember it. So this one is edible, this one is not.
Particular benefits to the violet, like medicinal or?
Yeah, it's great for lots of things. Lots of nutrition. So pretty much any leafy green is going to be high in vitamins A and C. And it's a really nice one because it's a mild green. A lot of our greens are pretty bitter, which have their own benefits. But to have a mild green that you can eat as a salad green is awesome. However, it has another benefit which would make you not want it to use it the same as lettuce. Because if you did, you might regret it later. We'll just say that. It has this property, which is my favorite word in herbalism, which is mucilaginous. So what that means is if you imagine what happens when you cook okra, how it gets all slimy, that's what mucilaginous means. So pretty similar to what it sounds like. And that's actually really good for us. It's really soothing to our digestive tract and our mucous membranes. But if you eat too much, it can kind of smooth things all the way out really quickly. So we don't necessarily want that. So just like other things, we want to eat it in moderation. Also good topically for the skin. So I like to throw it into my salves. So lots of great things about violets. The roots are poisonous. The flowers are edible. They make a great garnish. You can candy them and put them on cakes and things. So all violets are edible except for the African violet, which if you knew your Latin, you would know that it's not a true violet. So everything that you would find growing here that is a violet is edible. So no matter what color, we have white violets, yellow violets, purple violets, they're all edible. Grapevine. This is starting to get to be a really good time to harvest this one because the leaves are getting bigger, but they're still tender. And I have a recipe for these up on my blog about how to make dolmas from them. So if you're not familiar with dolmas, they're really tasty, and you take spiced rice and roll them up in here and steam it, and it's super yummy. So you can do that with these. You can pickle them for later use. Also, really cool survival thing about grape is that if you were out, maybe lost, stuck somewhere, and you needed water, you could cut the vine and you would get fresh water out of it that's filtered. So you could drink that water. And then it would seal itself up and you could come back and reopen that wound and drink some more fresh water. So yeah, wow is right. It's a pretty cool thing. The whole vine holds water, so it's like a water container. Usually plants are pulling water up from their roots. So if you remember that whole xylem phloem thing from high school, the xylem is the water and it's bringing it up from the roots. This is a very nondescript shrub. It was one of the hardest ones for me to learn because of that, but it has a fabulous characteristic that's very helpful. This was maybe the inspiration for Scratch and Sniff. So we're gonna see if we can smell it. I'm going to pass this around and do some scratching and sniffing. This is a native shrub called spice bush, and it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, shrubs. You can make tea out of the twig or the leaf. Probably the most amazing part of it is the berries, which we don't see until the fall, but they'll be a bright red, about that big, and you can dry them and grind them whole in your coffee grinder. You can't do that when they're fresh. You can't just eat them because it's basically a very thin skin over a very hard seed that could break your teeth. So dry them and grind them, and then it's like an allspice alternative, which is what they did with it back in the day when the spice trade was very difficult. So I love doing that with it. I make a pumpkin spice blend with other herbs with that, and then again make tea out of the twigs and the leaves. And a cool ethnobotanical fact was that the Cherokee would serve spice bush tea before council meetings, and may still today, right? Because these things still carry over today, and serve that before the council meetings, and it inspires friendship. I love keeping it around for that reason and serving it. That's right. Everybody should plant it, which is a really good point. This is what I recommend to people to plant who have invasive shrubs like honeysuckle or privet, things like that. This is a great one to replace it with, because when we take out invasives, right, things that aren't originally from here that really proliferate, we need to replace them with other natives, because those invasive seeds will live in the soil, in the seed bank, and just come back. So we need to replace them. Spice bush is a great one. What do the flowers look like? They're small and yellow and look almost exactly like a sassafras flower, if you've ever seen a sassafras flower, because they're in the same family. And when I'm talking about botany, I really like to talk about plant families, because once you start learning how things are related, it makes it easier to identify them and sometimes to know whether they're edible or medicinal and how. So in the same family, the laurel family, not like mountain laurel, but like bay laurel. So like the bay leaves that we cook with, also the same family as cinnamon and, strangely enough, avocado. One other thing I wanted to say about it was that it is a host plant for a native butterfly. So the spice bush swallowtail is pretty fantastic. So if you plant native plants, you might get some pretty awesome native wildlife too. So very similar to other aromatic herbs like ginger. So for stomach aches, warming for things like colds and flus. This is sassafras. So since we were just talking about its cousin, we can talk about it for a minute. And what makes sassafras super unique? The different shaped leaves. So I'll show you. These are so tiny. They're so cute. I love it. I'll show you the different shapes of leaves here. So I don't know if you can see because they're very tiny, but you can scooch in. There's 3 different shapes, right, of leaves. And I was talking to this fabulous old timer, which when you live in Appalachia, that's like one of the bonuses. And he was like, well, you know, there's 4 different shapes of leaves, right? And I was like, no, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you got your regular old leaf, you got your turkey foot, and then you got your right-handed mitten and your left-handed mitten. I was like, oh my God, that's so great. Thank you. So yeah, we got 3 different shapes, and I love asking people what they think that looks like because I get all kinds of different answers, but from ghost to Tyrannosaurus feet. So it's pretty awesome. So that helps you to remember this one for sure. It's the only one I know of besides one crazily unrelated plant, which is mulberry, that has these 3 different leaf shapes. I'm sure there's some kind of evolutionary reason for this, and if somebody knows, please tell me, because I don't, and I would love to know, but it's just really interesting. Some other things, its new growth is green. I don't know if you can see that, but these young branches are green, and they do this like swoopy thing. That's the technical term. But sassafras is awesome, and the leaves are edible. It's what they call gumbo filet or filet gumbo, whichever you choose. And all you have to do is dry those leaves and powder them. And it's a great thickener for gumbo or stews. I put it in my curry as a thickener. It's really nice. And the roots are what was traditionally made into tea and still today, especially in this region. And it's a great, what's called an alterative in herbalism. So it helps clear metabolic waste from the system. So it's a great spring tonic. And it's really, really yummy. And we're going to actually have some tea later with this and the spice bush and one we're going to see right up here too. So it'll be really yummy. So questions about, yeah. Alterative. Yeah. Means cleansing of metabolic waste and rebalancing, basically. Putting everything back into balance.
And that's tea from the roots.
Yeah, tea from the roots. Uh-huh. Yeah, like root beer. Mm-hmm. This is my favorite question. Okay. The question was, wasn't there some research out about this and basically how it causes cancer? And so I love using this as an example. Yes, there was. It was taken off the shelves of stores because it was said to cause cancer. And this is where it's really important for us to do our own research on anything and everything we consume. Because what happened was plants are holistic organisms, just like us, right? They have lots of different components and phytochemicals that make them up. They took one of the components out of the sassafras that whoever deemed to be the most medicinal one in there, and they extracted that out of the plant, so it's just that part, and then they shot it into the bloodstreams of mice in the same quantity as if we ate a whole truckload of sassafras, and then, surprise, surprise, the mice got cancer. So if you ate a whole dump truck load of tomatoes, you could get cancer. So, it was not a great study, to say the least. So that's why we need to do our own research, right? Mountain people have been drinking sassafras tea forever, and as far as I know, nobody's getting cancer from it.
Hey, this is making gumbo for a long time, too.
And gumbo, yeah, for sure. So, but again, a good point too, those toxins in there are balanced out by other components of the plant. So it's better to consume them whole. Don't eat truckloads. Yeah, everything in moderation, right? Including moderation. All right, so y'all are super lucky to be here right now, is all I can say, to see this lovely flower in bloom. And it's just about done. But anybody know what this is?
Sweet shrub.
Sweet shrub, Carolina allspice, sweet bubbies is probably my favorite for a reason I'll tell you in a minute. But we got another scratch and sniff, so pass that around. The real aromatic part, it might be hard to smell in the rain, but this lovely aromatic part is the flower. So if you were to take a flower and hold it and warm it in your hands, it would start to get really lovely and aromatic. And that's why it was called sweet bubbies, because supposedly women would take those flowers and put them in their cleavage, and the warmth there would make them more aromatic, and then they would go say to whoever they were interested in, "Come smell my sweet bubbies." So that's a pretty good story. Anyway, so Carolina allspice. This is a native plant and very similar to allspice as well, but differently in the way that you process it. You can dry the twigs and then scrape them with a knife, and it looks similar to allspice or cinnamon and smells similar. But I will cut the twigs into little pieces and make tea out of it. So the tea we have today is sassafras, spicebush, and Carolina allspice, all simmered, and because they're harder ingredients, right? So they need to be simmered. And I call it my Appalachian chai. So now y'all all know the secret. But it's great. It turned out to be a good day for it. It'll be nice and warming when we get back. So the twigs of the Carolina allspice and the spice bush, and then the root of the sassafras. Yeah.
And that sassafras trees get pretty good size. Can you get it from a more mature?
You can. They're much harder to dig out, and you have to scrape the bark off the root.
So a young plant.
And they don't get very big anymore, unfortunately. There's some blights out there. So